Okay, I'm Justin Ehrenstein.
Yeah.
Welcome to Check In to Check Out. My name is Justin Ehrenstein, Chief Product Officer at Mobile First.
And I'm Connor Burke, co-host of the show and the experimentation director at Mobile First.
Awesome. I'm super excited about this guest, Connor. We got Girish Joshi, Director of ECommerce at LG. Amazing brand. I'm really looking forward to actually getting some of their washer and dryer in my new house. So I was really excited to talk to him. Girish, can you give me that discount code?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a good conversation. We did even touch on buying new products there, like the refrigerator and washing machine, and how do you tell stories around those products? I thought that was an interesting part of our conversation. But a lot of stories in this episode, it seemed like. I think probably one of our longer ones, but definitely some really interesting pieces of information here.
I completely agree. So I've been debating probably for the past 15 years of my life since I graduated college, do I need to get an MBA? And I obviously haven't done it yet, but I know now I do not need to. After listening and having this conversation, I feel like I got the MBA that I need. This was the most insightful conversation that I've had probably in my life around e-commerce. So I'm really excited to present this conversation, and we'll just get right into it. And just so our viewers know, Girish started talking before he even started asking questions. And he was just giving insight after insight. And we weren't even recording yet. And so we said, wait, we just have to press the record button. So you're actually going to see Girish get right into it. We're not following our format. He's just talking from the hip and giving us so many e-commerce insights. So without further ado, Girish Joshi, Director of E-commerce from LG.
She said, excuse me, can I check in? Says the manager, how long you staying? She says, one night, maybe two. Well, I'm just passing through. I'm just passing through. And I said, check in, check out, check in, check out, check in.
Can I tell you guys? I hope you're recording this. I think this is a fun story. Yeah. So, I long before I got into e-commerce, I went to therapy, and it's just a good idea, and so I got a lot out of it. Once I started being in like a P&L owner role with e-commerce, I noticed my therapist's eyebrows arching a little more whenever I happened to be talking about work. It's like, what's going on here? And then, at least at my current role, I was still making time for therapy when I was at work, and so I'd like carve out an hour in the morning once a week to do it. And one morning, which was a pretty typical e-commerce morning, it was just like, things were on fire and like revenue this and conversion that, and it was time for my call, and I was just like, I can no longer do this therapy. This is getting in the way, bro. The relationship is over. And it was. And we've been, I suppose I could reach out to him. It was 10 years we were doing therapy together. It wasn't, I don't know. There is a fight or flight response that is happening at work in e-commerce that isn't that it doesn't orchestrate well with self-reflection, Like, not to say that either of those are bad or good things. It's just like, I got some stuff to do right now.
Yeah, and of course it doesn't go with self-reflection because, all right, so you had a goal for the week. Well, Monday, you're reviewing how you did last week, and then you're fighting for that goal for next week or on the month. Maybe the period between December 25th and January 1st, you get a break. But even when you're on vacation, those numbers are still coming in. And you're still looking at them.
This is correct. So I think to myself it was some major holiday. And because, also when I'm on vacation or there is a major holiday, this is almost by definition an incredibly important time in e-commerce.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly checking the numbers. Like if the hourly sales aren't good, like I don't like my appetizer anymore. And I remember I was like on the beach with someone while I was checking my numbers, and they just looked at me like I was a monster, and they were correct. And they're like, "Don't you think you ought to put this down now? Like, you're not that important." And that's actually all. There's nothing. I can't argue with that on any level. Like, even there's this culture too of the like the war room call, which I don't love, like kind of using the militaristic language around everything. But we're going to be on 24/7, which you do need to be, because you can't waste time in a business that is 24/7. But not everyone is actually useful all of the time. And kind of being in it and just sort of monitoring that traffic and chatter uh, every second of the day it's like it's bad for your personal life, it's bad for your decision making too. You start getting like too hyper focused on like just on like the next revenue bump or something.
You do. So
We said this just before the call started recording, but a lot of this job feels like gambling. I think that from our perspective, there's times where you're just looking at the numbers and you're like, I'm up, and then you come back in a week and you're like, I'm down. And I think people get addicted to that. I personally do. Especially when we do a lot of A/B testing, I find myself just, you know how they make a joke that when you're standing at a party and you want to look busy, you just open the weather app. That's kind of what I do, but with the numbers. You're sitting around trying to look busy, and it's like, well, I might as well just check on how everything's doing.
I'm totally actually one of the I mean, I've been in this game for a little while, but one of the things I look for in myself is the more frequently I check the numbers, I know that I'm not thinking properly. Once I start getting beyond checking the numbers twice a day, and there are times I'm checking it 11 to 20 times a day, but once I get beyond checking it twice a day, like I'm not living in the creativity and purpose that it takes to really transform the business.
I love that.
and what is the creativity and purpose that it takes to transform the business?
I knew you were going to ask that.
So this is the direct to consumer magic and Amazon innovation that we all know and love. That is, put your customer experience first. So one of the things that I think I'm gifted with is being tremendously irritable. Like everything pisses me off.
Uh-huh.
And that means that I like just sort of trying to deal with my own frustrations is like a great way for me to empathize with my customer. They're often like less demanding than I am, and so that creativity, like, it begins with trying to figure out the biggest problems that your customers facing to solve. Try to think out of them. So here's another thing. This is a separate topic. I think you have to be an idea factory, because ultimately you just don't know what's going to work. And if you are serious about that, most people start running out of ideas that are novel to themselves after like 5 or 6. It is like very difficult to continually generate a list of things that, like, hey, this is useful. Most people's critic will kick in, and that process of trusting yourself, of continuing to try to pull ideas from like disparate areas, of even just copying others, that takes time. If you're just sort of in fantasy land around like your year over year increase, that's time wasted when you should be like trying to be creative.
Totally agree.
Love that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've had this big thing going on in my mind that this is controversial, but I'm pretty anti-framework. I actually don't like frameworks because I think they hamper creative thinking. But there's one framework that I keep coming back to, and that is like, always keep experimenting on something else. Always find that next thing, whether it's an A/B test, not necessarily, but like, marketing is moving so fast. The amount of change that you've experienced in the past 3 years of e-commerce is extreme, and the next 3 years are going to be even more extreme with AI and the change of the world dynamics. And the only thing that I can think of is you just have to try new things faster.
I like that. I guess the reason I'm a little skeptical here is that doesn't sound like a framework so much as like a coda or like an outlook.
Sure. Yeah, agreed. I guess, I don't have a framework.
Yeah, but it's a good outlook, and I'm not against outlooks. In fact, I'm really strongly in favor of outlooks. But I do look a little askance at frameworks, in part because so what the framework can be good at is creating breadth in your thinking. So generally it's like classifying your thinking into different areas, and maybe there's an area that just hasn't occurred to you, so it kind of gets you into that breadth. But what the framework tends to not do is it tends to underemphasize like I said, I'm an irritable person. Inside of me, there's this intuition that is like very powerful, and the framework tends to sort of like sidestep that a little bit, and that's why I love the framework. It tends to make all things look equally important, and some things tend to be dramatically more important, and that scale matters.
How do you know what's dramatically more important? No, that's amazing. You
You
feel it.
feel it. Yeah. So this is one of the. I think when I'm having this interview, I might be coming off as like this kind of new age guy. I intuit what is correct, Justin. That's how I do it. But just in my defense, I'm trained as a physicist. I'm pretty good at math. I love chess. I'm a very analytical dude. Like I got the receipts on the analysis. Um, what there's another lesson I've learned in e-commerce. I'm getting to your point. The other lesson that I've learned is you may try a million things, but there's going to be one thing that's subtle is dramatically better than everything else. And this is what we're always looking for. And so therefore, when I say that you can feel it, what I'm trying to do is as quickly as possible my compass to that thing that starts just totally obliterating the sensors. And that I feel inside of me, like, oh my God, as I'm evaluating my own ideas, I start saying to myself, does this make me go, wow? Does this make me go, whatever, oh fuck? The and that's where I want to start. Hey, by the way, we had a post on this subject. You were talking about getting your welcome offer to the right level. And this is precisely the thing. There is a offer that starts behaving non-linearly, and in your post you talked about it being a 20% offer. That's, by the way, exactly my experience. So that's the magic number. And then secondly, when it works, it works in such a cartoonishly large way that no one can even like fathom that it worked that well. And I can give you countless examples like this. And this is when we talk about ideating and experimenting and kind of doing everything, what we are ultimately after is identifying as many of those moments as possible, those moments that completely break our instrumentation. That makes sense? I hope so.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. Like a lot of experimentation, especially on site, is like, okay, 1%, 2%, maybe 3%. You're celebrating. But the things that move a business that you can see in the numbers is that 20%. And how do you find that 20%?
At a minimum.
At a minimum, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Exactly.
really that 50 to 100%, right? That's what you're looking for.
And as humans, we don't know what that's going to be. And it's always bigger than we anticipate. Every time. So do you have a process to find it? I hear the intuition. Is there things that you go to that help you more often than not? How do you get there?
I mean that this is the so let me start with in the ideation phase, I really try to get at something that bothers me.
Yeah.
And then when it bothers me, you have to take it a little further because while you may empathize with that moment, that experience that it bothers you, you have to start taking your imagination in different places to sort of build something a little more cohesive. So do that as many times as possible and get a lot of ideas. So this is kind of in the ideation phase. Once we get to implementation, here's the other thing: go big first, and then hit the brakes.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Love that.
So what you are looking for is a jump in your instruments. Your instruments are telling you how the thing is going. You could be measuring all sorts of stuff. If you haven't hit the point where the instrument blips up, you're going to think it's not effective. So you need to sort of set the volume control such that you get a big blip and then sort of dial it back until you find that point where, okay, now it doesn't matter anymore. And so this is a very crucial point. And that now depending upon how you've got buy-in for your idea, people are going to tell you to go the other way around. They're going to tell you start small and then see when it hits. And this is a recipe for complete and utter failure. Will your idea fail? But your ideation process is going to start failing.
Yeah.
So don't do that. And so then there's some other ways to attack this, which I guess I'll tell you about now. People only go big when they think it doesn't matter at all. Like they think there's like no consequence to it. The more the others think that there is a consequence to a thing, the more they suddenly want to get really, really careful. So there is a huge advantage not to you not advocating for your ideas, but letting others think that they are not good. Like it's actually helpful to, as long as they're willing to experiment with you, that's all you need. As if they're willing to experiment with you, you've got all the buy-in you need. Now you don't want them to think it's good until after the fact. Up until, and that's it's really, really helpful. So, you know,
That's very counterintuitive.
yeah. I can give you a few examples. I need to be a little careful here. So there's some things about my existing strategy I don't want to give away. So here's one of my favorite metrics, and I just call it attach rate. So whenever you are from a value strategy, one of the things that everyone in e-commerce runs into is like, I cannot compete on price. Okay, great. You can't compete on price. There are a whole bunch of reasons why not. But what you can do is work in complementary and substitute products. In complementary and substitute products, you can do lots of different things in price. So complementary products means I'm going to bundle products together, or I'm going to bundle services together. And it's particularly when you get into services, you can be infinitely creative on what exactly constitutes a service. At the end of the day, a service is a checkbox. It's literally somebody just opting in. And if you can come up with things that people want to click a checkbox on, no matter what the price or non-price is associated with that, you have found something really special, and you can be very, very creative there. So whenever you click that checkbox or you add that product to the cart, this is what I'm talking about with attach rate. And so when I'm looking for value, what I'm looking for is, first of all, if something currently has a low attach rate, that means a customer doesn't want to value it. And the very first thing I'm looking for is increase the attach rate. What do I need to do to make this thing appealing enough for that attach rate to pop? And this is the starting place for now starting to look for profitability and conversion improvements. And so
Yeah.
this is basically the process. And you can, I think thinking of it as generally as it is a checkbox is the right way to do it, because now you can go anywhere. I'm not like trying to sell you the whatever widget you sell, there is some other widget that nobody wants. And don't try to bundle those two things together. Like, this is not
Yeah.
helpful to anyone. And
Yeah.
but if you think of it as a checkbox, like, hey, would you like me to call you to talk about how much you hate my guts? Like, this is how we're getting creative.
Yeah. That attach rate, and especially with services, and it's an incredible insight. And obviously, at LG, you're doing this with electronics, and we don't need to get into the exact strategy of the services, but do you think this applies to any business? Is this something that Kohl's, for example, that's been struggling 11 quarters in a row, could apply, or some small fashion retailer could also apply? Or is this specific for electronics in your eyes?
I think it would be pretty arrogant for me to say that it applies to everybody. So that's my inclination.
Yeah.
Let me say the following. I'm fortunate to be operating in businesses that already have scale. So when you already have scale, you can play a little looser with margin. Whether that's a contribution margin or your acquisition costs, you can play a lot looser there. So that's a privilege I have. Also, my products have elaborate, well-established supply chains, and I work in an industry that's highly consolidated. This gives me room to make mistakes that I don't know if a fashion retailer can make. And so I do think it applies. And then the second thing is really around trust, which I hope we can talk more about. I'm being like a little absurd when I say it's a check mark, right? But if one were to do that to like a really large extreme, customers would quickly perceive what you're doing and being like, I don't like this. Stop taking advantage of me. And the degree to which your product is not trusted, you really cannot play these kinds of games. Because while the goal of creating a service bundle is ultimately to deliver more value to your customer, if your customer doesn't think that you can be trusted, don't be very, very careful with that. In fact, I mean, so I can talk about this. It's sort of pretty evident on our products. My industry, the appliance industry, the electronics industry, has this reputation of not always being the highest quality. I remember people talking to me about this notion of planned obsolescence I think that my thing breaks because that's so they can get me to buy another one. And let me tell you, having been in these companies for a while, nothing is planned. If it's getting obsolete, it happened by accident. And but that's like a notion of quality that's really unfortunate. So the LG brand is really trying to build this notion of reliability around the products. It's absolutely true, and we're working really hard with the products. But what we found is that because I think the industry as a whole's kind of notion of reliability was tarnished, when we offered a warranty, it wasn't nearly as effective as a third-party warranty. And I was constantly asked, why is this? Explain this to me, Girish. And I'm like, I don't know why. I just know for some reason, if it's coming from someone else, it has a much bigger impact. So the attach rate on those warranties is something I absolutely played with. And to go all the way back to what your actual question was, when I'm trying to innovate and figure out attach rates, sometimes I look for something where the attach rate is low, like the warranties. The attach rates really weren't where they should be. And this indicates that there's value to be found. And now we can start playing around with different things to drive that value.
That makes sense. So we're actually going to get back to the check-in a little more. And as an e-com director, it's impossible to be great at everything. I mean, you're probably really good at some things. What are some of your strengths? But also, maybe more interestingly, what do you have to rely on others for where it isn't a strength?
I think my biggest strength is also my biggest weakness. So I think my biggest strength is that I'm really in tune with, like, I can imagine what a correct answer should be. And I don't feel super constrained about what my current situation is, what the circumstances are for me to imagine what good looks like in any case, not just at work, in any situation. And then when I'm not in that space, I'm a little agitated by it. It bothers me. And this is a strength because it helps me be creative. It helps me sort of try to push in the direction of what I think good looks like. So that is without question the strength. That's where I think my innovation comes from. But it's for sure a weakness. And part of that is, like, for me, this discomfort is absolutely visceral. And like I'm like, gosh, this isn't the right answer. And I physically feel it. I'm feeling it now as I describe it to you. And that, I think, is really uncomfortable for other people to be around. And it upsets them. And I'm you know, I'm like this really squishy, empathetic dude outside of work. But inside of work, they kind of feel this agitation from me. And so often I have to rely on other people to help me soften the message to get some better collaboration. I mean, I don't want to sell myself short. I can get some buy-in on my thinking. I'm not completely inept at this, but I get a ton out of having some diplomats on my side. That can do something that I'm not so good at.
Interesting. Hearing you say that kind of makes me think about what you were talking about with attach rates and kind of the way that you look at this business. How important do you think, like, telling a story is for a brand or for building trust, I guess?
I'm definitely not that good at it. So in that sense, for sure, I rely on others. In fact, I think I'm hilariously bad at it. Like, what I find interesting is weird and not interesting to other people.
Interesting.
I don't know. One of my sort of gut instincts is that there tends to be large reactions quickly, and so my patience for a long narrative is thin. I don't know how universal that is. That being said, there is something around trust that can only be created through a long narrative, and it's not lost on me, but it's not my nature, and I also kind of think it can't be controlled. Perhaps I'm being vague here, but whether you tell a story or not, a story is being told. That's my point. And the long story that is being told is not really in your control. It's fundamentally something that's sort of experienced over time. Yeah. I find it often a little presumptuous for people to try to tell a story without being interesting, and that's kind of what I see a lot of in kind of corporate storytelling, that it's not inherently interesting. I think it depends on what you're selling. Do you want me to tell you a story about refrigerators?
Do you feel like customers benefit from that kind of a pitch or that kind of a tactic? Do
I
they?
feel like customers would benefit from anyone who dared tell them a story about refrigerators being sent to a swamp somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
how dare you waste my time with such a ridiculous thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if I sat here, I could like probably craft a.
I mean,
I'm
I
sorry.
agree with you
The
because
most interesting story about refrigerators is Dexter. And okay, now if I were, I don't, I think that's the wrong story to sell, to tell or to
interesting.
sell.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the products and the brands. I think with refrigerators, there's a thing there's an element of that, I don't need to know the lifestyle that goes with the refrigerator most of the time, I would think.
Wait, I love what you just said here. Now this I'm with you on. So so there are things if so and maybe this is the insight because the story is never if it's not about the product, absolutely there's an interesting story to tell. So there's an interesting story to tell with the LG company. In fact, anyone who joins the company is going to hear this story right away of a company of a nation in the ashes of war rising up and recreating itself as a manufacturer of products that build trust around the world very, very quickly. And this is something that everyone at our company learns about and is super proud of. And in fact, being part of that, I often feel like I'm not part of people who love their products, but I'm part of people who love their country. And this is a story that LG sort of doesn't tell globally, but is very much present in the culture. And yeah, that concept for sure has this value in it. I think it is valuable in sales. It's just it's yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just not good at this. I think it's there. I think it's there. I probably should dial into it more.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think it changes for everybody. But it's just something we see a lot with our various, we work in so many different industries, but we've often found that you sell the story, you don't necessarily always sell the product. But there are so many cases where that just doesn't apply at all. And for me, I would think refrigerators may be one of those, but I could see myself getting sold on a good story about a refrigerator. So I see the opportunity. But yeah.
Yeah, I like this. I haven't thought about this much. Like I said, I don't know if I'm. Yeah, I don't know. The good story for sure. Sorry,
Yeah.
you've really got me thinking about this topic. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, no
Uh,
worries.
Two pieces of unsolicited advice on storytelling.
Yeah.
Take a storytelling class. I took just one 6-week class on storytelling, and at the end, you get up in front of an audience and tell a story. It has made me a better thinker of how people get interested in something and what you have to say. To like get someone interested in something for 5 minutes is really hard. And how do you keep their interest? My mind was open in like, how do you build upon a story? Super interesting. And also like you then have to do work. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's like what you're saying when you're having to sell that idea, even just internally, understanding these components of a story that you're essentially giving people puzzle pieces and you're letting them put the puzzle together. You already have an idea of what it's going to be, but you're giving them those hints that they need to put it all together. And then when they've put that piece together, they feel a part of what you're pitching. They feel like they have ownership of it in some sense. And it allows, I think in a lot of ways, it allows people to connect, to trust, whether you're just trying to pitch a new feature to your development team or you're trying to sell people on, a smart fridge or something. There's so many different components.
I love where you guys are going. I think I've learned something today. I will take that storytelling class. And Connor, I particularly like what you're saying around mystery.
Yeah.
That they
Yeah.
get to solve the mystery. I love that a lot.
Yes, that's exactly right.
You're holding yourself back. I want to hear what you were actually thinking.
I think that for my general experiences in e-commerce is that people feel like unwilling to sort of follow a direction. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the principal reason for it is they have been punished. Like they've been punished for taking risks. And so one of the very first thing that you can do for any e-commerce team is like have a very clear point of view and go after it and say, do not worry, my friends, it's on me. I will take all the blame. So this is like a super risky approach because if you're wrong, it will be you and you will take all the blame. So you ought to be right about what you're talking about. But I have a feeling that most seasoned e-com directors actually do know what's right. Like you can very quickly diagnose your quick hits and then just own it. So that's my other way, Justin. My other way is to lead from the front, as opposed to the DM who's sort of leading from the.
Yeah. And that takes vision.
Yeah, vision helps. Vision, but actually, more than anything, it takes conviction. There's a lot of things that are just like absolute murder to creativity. So one of them is too much like punishment for mistakes. The one that is like much more insidious is consensus. And when you have like a group of people who like, let's all agree before we take an action. And the toughest thing to do, especially if you're like a remotely like not a psychopath, is to be like, we're going this way because I say so. And we might get a little friction from that at first, but pretty quickly you'll actually get people who like just appreciate it, especially if it's not always because you say so. Like, just has to be that way sometimes.
I love that idea. I think something people struggle with in your position is knowing, like, when do you trust your gut over the data or the team's consensus? When do you know, or when do you, like, maybe even just personally, when do you feel like, I hear what y'all are saying, I hear what the data's saying, but I feel this and I know this is the right direction. Is that something you've done in the past? Maybe have an example of that?
Has a post on this, and so I think that when it comes to this, there are three things. So the first thing that we're talking about right now is a very strong personal intuition, and my belief is you must start there. But there are two other things that you need. One of them are anecdotes. Those anecdotes can be coming from your team. Those are other people's opinions, I guess. I guess that's hilarious that I think other people's opinions are just anecdotes, but whatever. And then thirdly, you have data. When all of those things are in agreement, you're onto something, right? We all agree, and the data agrees. But what happens when they're not in agreement? They should come into agreement. And so the one that ends up being like your best gauge is the anecdote. So like when other people think the thing, I think we really ought to pay attention. And so then the next thing we can start bringing into our minds is like, well, why isn't that how I feel? Why don't I agree with you? And if you can't reconcile that, that's something to take a pretty good look at. So like I said, my taste is a little weird. And so I often like a thing that other people are like, Girish, that is ugly. I don't like it. And you know what? I think they're probably, maybe so, right? And so I try to trust them then. But then we get into the data, and this is where everybody makes the big mistake. Because, the thing is like, I'm uncertain, so then what? So in general, when the data doesn't agree with either the anecdote or your personal intuition, it is almost always true that there is something wrong with the metric or the instrument. And you need to adjust the metric and the instrument. And that's so crucial. And you can't start with the data because you never know what's going on with the metric and the instrument. You have to start with one or the other. The other thing that I might mention, particularly around anecdote, is the anecdote is insufficiently nuanced and insufficiently future centric. So when I was talking a little bit about how I like relate to like my own strong feelings about things, I mentioned I have to look beyond the existing problem. And I can do that because I'm just thinking about how I feel. It's like easy to empathize with myself. But I'm glad you but that's important because often you need to kind of go into like a second or third level about what's going on. And when you're hearing that anecdote from your customer or your team members, they may have a harder time getting there. And the other issue is that the imagination of what's possible. So at a certain point, some people can only see like the solutions that are like in front of them. They don't, and this is, I think I was going to say like the number one thing that can kind of hurt like e-commerce teams is like getting burned. The second thing is like an inability to think sufficiently big. And I'm not just talking about the 100, 300, 600% year-over-year growth numbers. I'm talking about that as people, we are going to transform about what we want. Like the reality itself will bend. That suddenly you can get something delivered in a day or in an hour, that our notion of what like desire is itself is like constantly changing. And if that sounds far-fetched, I would just point us to a mere like 14 years ago before we even had iPhones. And like the notion that you no longer needed to remember anything, which is easy to accept now, would be ludicrous then. There's a kind of really big thinking that somebody needs to feel like they've been given permission to have. And it's not that we're not capable of this. Most people have been told, stop doing that. It's not appreciated in this room. And that's a shame. There's a huge value in that. It's appreciated in my room.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great
I
answer.
I love that. I love the need for big thinking. It's hard to do. It's hard to train. Like, how do you get someone to really open that up and do that? But yeah, go
Actually,
ahead.
Justin, it's one of my interview questions.
All
So
right.
yeah, I mean, so it's an Amazon principle, think big. And so the one of my interview questions, I usually will ask somebody, tell me about your favorite company. They always have one. Tell me about like what makes them your favorite, why they're the most innovative. They usually have one. And then I'll say, okay, whatever context I'm in, I'm like, I want you to do all of this to do the same kind of thing at our company. You have no constraints whatsoever. Anything you want, we can make happen. What would you do? And this is I'd like to do this as an interview. It's not because the question here is not to see like what they come up with. The question here is to see if I am able to unlock inside of them. I'm trying to give them the permission now in a
Yeah.
completely theoretical way. You have the permission to dream. What do you do with it? And some people just simply cannot step into the void, and
Yeah.
others can, you know. So that's how we start. And I think that you're right. It does take practice, but the practice is this is taking the step into it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
I love that. That's honestly that's that's great.
I think you have really brought to the forefront this need for conviction in your ideas and the pain points you're seeing of your customer. Has that ever burnt you? Has that ever brought about a failure? Or has it always brought about success?
I don't think anyone fails when they're thinking about others. And so to the extent that like I've tried to like turn my imagination to customers, I don't think I can ever say I've failed in that endeavor. But
Awesome.
I do think that like the process of doing this and like the process of the conviction can sometimes have made me like maybe like self-centered and perhaps deaf to other ideas and other ways of thinking. And in that sense, like they've been horrible failures. And yeah, so in that sense, yes, for sure. And I think another,
Yeah. Awesome. So now we're going to go to the checkout portion, kind of looking ahead and really thinking about how do you make the brand experience at LG or any other brand you're thinking about synonymous with reliability and trust? How do you do that?
this is my favorite topic. I'm so excited because this is what I'm actually working on right now. Okay, so the very first thing that the brand did is kind of stake claim to reliability. And we did that through our badge and through getting consumer reports to say great things about us that are true. And our products don't break. That's nice. So the next part was like trying to define what that meant in terms of like the e-commerce experience. So the very first thing that I started working on was the notion of warranties and innovating there in warranties. If you go on our website, you're going to see the best value you can get for a warranty anywhere in the business by far, and that's standing behind our product as reliable. What you won't see is like our super snappy and fast website, and that is a problem. And so the next part around being reliable is like we don't it's not just the products that we sell that are reliable, it's the experiences that we sell that are reliable. The first experience is the website, so we're in the process of making that transformation. That's the second part of creating a reliable experience. The next thing is something you and I have talked about at great length, and this is conversational commerce. So if you start chatting, and very shortly, if you start calling on the phone with our new agents, they've been trained extensively directly by people, sometimes in Korea, by the folks who actually manufactured the product, and they can give you the absolute best information about the product online in a way that you just can't get from a Best Buy, or I shouldn't say that. They're a wonderful partner. But any retailer has to learn a lot of different products, and we have engineers who built our products that are available. So that's the second thing. When I think of what we call our Better Life Pros, I'm trying to create the relationship of being with your uncle or your mom who really knows this stuff, and you can just take their word for it. This is absolutely trying to port the Chewy customer service experience to the appliance world. And then the next thing, and this is another area that again my entire industry suffers from, is really a great deal of difficulty around delivery and installation. And so this is that again, you're dealing with like every major provider is outsourcing the last mile delivery. And if you outsource the last mile delivery, that outsourced person often forgets that the real customer is the person who bought the thing, not me who buys their services. I'm not the customer, my customer's the customer. And so we're starting to innovate there. Later in the summer, you're going to see our own network rolled out with LG hats. And this is part of my direct to consumer strategy. So these are the major areas. So number one is kind of changing the website experience, conversational commerce, doing a lot around warranties, and then also doing an owned delivery and repair service. So this is the scheme. We are deep in implementing it. I suspect to some degree you will see all of it rolled out before the year is out, and that's the plan. That's the plan.
Lots of questions from that. I want to start with the delivery, like, because I've shipped appliances before in a past life, and customers see the person, whether it's a white glove delivery or to the curb, they see that as an extension of your company. If you ordered a white glove to get the refrigerator up to in New York City to your third story walk up, and they break it along the way or they dent it, they don't blame the delivery company because they just think the delivery company is you. They have no idea. So I love what you're doing around that. I think
That's exactly right.
Amazing. The website, bringing that up so it represents your brand. Is that something that you iteratively do? Is that something that is going to have some large project? How do you make that happen in a way that represents your vision and ensures business success?
Everything that I just talked about, all those pillars that I discussed, aren't sort of like traditionally in the tunnel of e-commerce, right? So the website is the most of that actually, but so the start of this is like, if we're gonna like think this big, we have to get our other partners on board to like to sort of work in that direction. It's certainly true with supply chain and third-party warranty companies. So with the website, a lot of what we're talking about here are our technology partners inside and outside the organization. And this is I'm very blessed to have have partners here who want to work with me and are actually willing to accept input into their area. So we do it iteratively. And my background, we do it iteratively. So one of the things that I'm really fortunate with is that my basic philosophy around technology is to do like the best of breed concept. Like, I'm not a huge believer in platforms, a very similar reason I'm not a huge believer in frameworks, but I'm not a big believer in platforms because like I want to make the things that need to be better as much as I need to. And I don't want to be kind of like locked into something. And I'm fortunate that inherent philosophy already exists with inside of my technology organization. David Kim is a real visionary in that way, and Cal Raman, who built it up at Samsung, incredible visionary in that way. So that's the start. The start is we're willing to build things ourselves when we need to, go custom, and then we can sort of enhance a part and make that part as good as possible. Now, how do you pick the part? I think you want to be opportunistic and impactful, and that sometimes requires like practical compromises. So you change what you can when you can, and then I'm also looking at what I think are the most important things and trying to change that now. That's that we're getting into the details of that, or something I have to hold a little close to my chest.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And looking at e-commerce as a whole, maybe LG through the lens of LG, where do you think the opportunities will be for the next 12 months? Where will growth come from?
I think what you maybe if you change the time frame, and we're talking like 2 or 3 years down the road. My vision is that we've like changed the notion of reliability so much. We've changed it that people are talking about LG the way people used to talk about Apple, where it just works. It's just okay. And when we reach that place, I think my sort of job with direct to consumer at LG will be done. And is there another frontier for e-commerce? I have to tell you, I don't see it yet, Justin. And maybe I'm not thinking big enough, but there is a part of me that feels like, okay, here's my hot take, and I'm not even sure if I believe this. My hot take is that the next generation for e-commerce is going to be about uh, disposal. Like, I don't think that it's so much going to be around consumption, but it's going to be more around how we refresh like what we have. And so this could be the idea of like everything's a subscription, the EAS world. But to me, that's actually not the interesting part about this. What I think people are interested in is like feeling like they're not wasting. They're not like I don't know, but I feel like super icky when I have like I don't know, like a wall of Amazon boxes I have to throw out.
Yeah, that's real.
That ick, um, like I can't rationalize it, Like the capitalist in me is like, buy more boxes, my friend. And
Yeah.
uh, but I know, but there's something about it that's not quite right. And I feel like that if e-commerce is really going to innovate, they're going to find a way to do this. And the existing solutions here are just bad. Like new packaging isn't right, and I don't know. There's something else around discovery, and I think the LLM thing is sort of changing discovery, and maybe it's all expert and agentic led, and um, I think that misses the point. Okay, here's another hot take. Um, so like the Amazon retail model is built on like assortment, price, supply chain on some level, and then and customer experience. And then everybody is innovating in these big buckets and taking it to like this extreme level. There is another component of retail that, and by the way, that entire thing from Amazon comes from Walmart. There's a great book called The Everything Store that describes this. But there's another bit of magic, and I think the magic is what you were talking about, Connor, and it's storytelling. And this is the Disney component of magic. And this is manufacturing desire and wonder. And I don't think that's done well in e-commerce. So I think there's something there, but I don't know what that is.
Great answer.
I love that. I completely agree. There's totally something there. And there are some small companies that do that well. Like one that comes to mind just because it's really in my neighborhood is Howler Brothers. They're a small
Oh yeah.
kind of fishing like lifestyle. Every 40-year-old guy in Austin has 3 Howler Brothers shirts and 2 hats. And none of them have ever fished before. But they sell that lifestyle of like, ooh, I'm cool and I do this, even though I go to my kids' soccer games every weekend.
Like the blue
So
collar stolen valor, that kind of
yeah, exactly. And they've done a really good job with that. But I agree, for the most part, there isn't
Connor, I'm
storytelling
not
going on.
laughing because that's such an insightful comment. You like made it impossible. It's like not. It's like went beyond funny. That's great.
I appreciate you not laughing at the joke then. Yeah.
That's a great joke.
Thank you.
Valor, stolen valor. How well said. Apt.
Yeah.
So, kind of lastly, to end this conversation is, what are you reading or watching that excites you? Whether it's like about e-commerce or just about life or anything that's really exciting you right now, and either watching, reading, listening to.
I'm crazy about ideas, and there are 3 podcasts that give me my idea fix. Number one is the Lex Friedman podcast. I just adore it. It's got some incredible e-commerce leaders on there, by the way. And Lex is a bit of a slow talker, so I would suggest listening to that at 2x at a minimum. And it's just a totally different experience. And
Uh-huh.
and the other 2 podcasts I love are Mindscapes and Philosophize This. I adore these podcasts.
Okay.
And then in terms of what I'm reading from an e-commerce perspective, I got a lot out of the Everything Store.
Mhm.
I I guess that's it. I knew this question was coming, and I think maybe I'm like semi-literate because I can't remember the last time I read a book that didn't have pictures in it.
Someone recommended a book to me the other day, and I was like, oh, that sounds really good. So I went to deep research and said, okay, can you please give me all the takes that are actually going to apply to my life in chapter by chapter? And within 15 minutes, I got like the book. I was like, okay, great. I don't need to read this book now. I just got,
Yeah.
which is terrible. I know it's terrible, but at the same time, I have a kid. Like, I got things to do.
You
Like,
got things
I
to
have
do.
to connect with.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Here's a book that I really like. I was just recommending it to someone the other day. Give and Take by Adam Grant.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about, he's an organizational psychologist. And it's kind of about like people's nature, how to manage their energy and get ahead sort of according to your nature and how to help others. Which I mean, it's pretty obvious, Justin, like you're very oriented towards helping, probably for its own sake. I think that helping is something that just means something to you, period. You're in the minority in that.
I appreciate that. Helping around the house is not something I do for its own sake, but in other things, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Your insights were just absolutely incredible. This was amazing. Thank you. We really appreciate it. So again,
Thanks for having me.
yeah.